Such a great turnout. All the slots are filled. My name is Linnea, and I'm the marketing intern at viaForensics. Welcome to our viaTalk. A little bit about viaTalks. They run every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Central, and they're a chat about mobile security, forensics, and more. You can keep up with talks and clips by searching the hashtag viaTalks on Twitter or on our YouTube page by searching viaForensics. Our presenter today is Kevin Swartz, who will be presenting on rooting in mobile forensics. Kevin is a marketing manager at viaForensics, but before that, he was a mobile security and forensics analyst with Android and iOS devices, testing device exploits and figuring out their implementation into current forensic techniques. Kevin got his Master's of Science in Information Security in 2012, and he's an instructor of cell phone forensics at Lewis University. So without further ado, let's move on to question one. The first question of the day, Kevin, is what does root mean?
Thank you, Linnea, and thank you for that great introduction. Real quick note, many of you might have registered and we're expecting a gentleman by the name of Tom Anderson to be doing this presentation, but congratulations to Tom and his family. They just welcomed their, I believe it's their first edition, so to their family. So congratulations to them, and instead you're stuck with me. As Linnea mentioned, I used to be a forensics analyst, and now I'm a marketing manager. So if you're wondering why this marketing manager is talking to you about rooting in Android, that would be why. For the better part of my first 2 years here at viaForensics, I was working on our forensics product, doing product support for vExtract, and researching some of our root and exploit methods here. So as Linnea mentioned, without further ado, let's talk a little bit about root today, what it means, and how it affects you as a forensic examiner. So root in itself it's the name of the account that by default has access to all commands and files on a Linux system or a Unix-like system. So you might have heard of it as the root account, the root user, the super user. I like to joke, I put down there, know what you're doing before you hit enter. If you see that command down there, if anybody's ever told to run that command on your Linux box, that's probably not a smart thing to do. That's going to delete most of your stuff. So root is basically, it's an account that has a significant amount of access in your Linux box.
So the next question is, what is the goal of root?
Well, root in itself, especially when you talk about forensics, is it's about data access. So when you're looking at root, especially when we talk about it in terms of forensics, you want to get root because that allows you to get to data that you wouldn't necessarily normally be able to get to. I've got a picture here on the right. It's of the Android framework, at least previously with the Dalvik cache and the Dalvik DM. There on the right-hand side, and if you see, everything is kind of sandboxed. Everything is separate. And to be able to get to different data that you want to get to, you need to be able to get privileged to do that. And you just don't have that right off the bat. So what you need to do is you need to try to get that access, those escalated privileges, which is root. That gets you out of the sandbox. You might also hear, especially when you talk about root in a non-forensic sense, you hear a lot about customization, so custom ROMs. You'll see a lot of forums online, XDA developers you might see is very popular. You've got CyanogenMod, which is a type of ROM. Those are a lot of times users root their devices to be able to maybe flash over a custom ROM or customize it or add some functionality to their devices that they wouldn't normally have. So I mentioned the permission. Linux is a permissions-based file system. And so what that means is everything's separated and permissions are granted based on a user ID and a group ID. So the default Android user ID is 2000, the value is 2000, and the group ID is 2000 as well. Well, the root user ID and group ID is 0. And in Linux, traditionally, the lower your number there, the lower your user ID and the group ID, the more access you have. So for example, for Android, if I was trying to get to something, and I'm the Android shell, user ID and group ID of 2000, and I'm trying to get to something that has a user ID and a group ID of, say, 1400, 1400, more than likely, I'm not going to be able to access that information. However, if I'm the root user, so I have a user ID and group ID of 0, and I'm trying to access something that has the user ID and group ID of 1400, I'm going to be able to access that because I have a lower user ID and group ID. So as user ID group ID 2000, which is the Android shell, most access is denied, and as user ID group ID of 0, most access is allowed. And to illustrate that, so this is why you root. So this is being shelled into. This has a terminal session basically on an Android device. And you see I've done an ADB shell command here for those of you that do some more manual Linux-type Android forensics. You might be familiar with this command. But I've changed into the data folder. And the data folder is a key folder where you want to see a lot of your information. Most of the applications on the phone are going to store some, if not most, of their data in this folder itself. And so as the Android shell, which is this $sign, I change into the data folder on this Android phone, and I type ls, which says list the contents here, and it says I can't open that directory, permission is denied. And that's because I don't have the proper access. So what I do instead is I do an ADB shell, and then I get root. Okay, and in this case, you see the SU there. That means I called super user. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But basically, that $sign, if you notice, changes from the $sign to the £sign. And the £sign means we are the root user now. And once we become the root user, we change in the same data folder. We list out the contents, and voila, we're able to see what's actually there. So that is why you root. That is. We've just gained access to the key critical data that we really want to see, and did so by rooting.
So I just wanted to jump in and mention that people can be asking questions in the webinar, but they can also go ahead and ask on Twitter. You can use our hashtag, which is viaTalks, and then these questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. So, Kevin, what are some issues with rooting?
Well, there's, thanks, Lynette. There are a number of exploits out there, and there are a number of devices as well. And first of all, without validation of the exploits, it's very difficult to know exactly what it's doing to your device itself. If you use an exploit that's out there in the wild and you haven't vetted it yet, it could be making substantial changes to your device that are very difficult to discuss in a forensic setting. A lot of times, this can be making modifications maybe to the data partition, that obviously you don't want to have happening. So you've got to look at that. But on the flip side, there is some risk sometimes with what's known as bricking the phone or making the phone inoperable or deleting key data. And this is due to the variety of exploits that are out there. So there are quite a few that find bugs in Android and Linux that translate to Android that use these exploits against devices. These exploits actually have a negative effect on the device. So maybe they might render the device inoperable. Secondly, the varieties of devices gives you issues there as well. So say you've got a device that is a Samsung Galaxy S4 on AT&T, and you try a root method that you know works on that AT&T on a Verizon version of the Samsung Galaxy S4. Well, this is just an example, but it could have very detrimental effects to the Verizon version. It could brick the phone or something similar. So the device in itself, even though there's a slight variation, they can be very, very different. And trying a root method that works on one device might not necessarily work on the other, and in fact might have some negative consequences.
Are there any ways to check for a pre-rooted device?
Yeah, so to check for a device, first of all, I'd shown you earlier the ADB shell command. When you type ADB shell and you've got a device connected, barring a few other steps on newer devices, you will see either a $sign or you'll see a £sign. If you've got the $sign, that means you do not have root. If you've got the £sign, that means you do have root. Now, if you have the $sign, that doesn't mean that you have to fret. You can type what's known as SU or super user SU, and that will check for maybe the person actually rooted their device, but long story short, it's not regularly actively rooted. You actually have to call that super user, and so you would type SU, and that might give you the £sign. Okay. If not, if neither of those work and you don't have root, you can look at custom recovery, which you can type ADB reboot recovery. That might, if the user customized their phone and flashed a custom recovery, you might have a root there. So it's not the end of the world if you don't have root.
Sorry, if I don't want a root, what alternatives do you recommend?
First, don't freak. I love this picture of this cat. It's you know, that is the epitome of some days that I feel like can feel like in forensics when things don't quite go the way that you had originally anticipated. But no, don't freak out. There are plenty of alternatives. JTAG chip-off, I know some of you might be groaning right now because that can be a long process, but that's actually the most, typically the most forensically sound way of doing things. It can also be the most destructive, so you're actually taking apart the phone and soldering leads to, you know, to the device itself. But you know, that said, that can be the most forensically sound. You're not modifying any data at all. You're just straight pulling it off. Maybe do a logical acquisition. So even without root, you can typically do a logical acquisition. In viaExtract, if you just have Android debugging, USB debugging enabled, you can get typically a full logical acquisition off of the device. That'll get you key data. It just typically won't get you deleted data, which is traditionally the point of rooting and getting a physical. You can also wait for new exploit methods. So even if something isn't out right now that works for the device, or if you vetted it and you say, look, this root method it works, but it's not forensically sound like I would want it to be, then you can, you know, stash that phone. Hold on to it. 3, 6, 12 months down the road, I can almost guarantee you that there is going to be a root method that works for it, and hopefully somebody will modify it to make it a little bit more forensically sound. Okay. A couple plugs. That's actually the end of the kind of presentation Q&A. A couple plugs for you here. Santoku Linux. All the screenshots that you saw today are from Santoku Linux, which is a free open source operating system that we put out from here via Forensics. You can download it today. It's got all the tools you need to do your own Android forensics manually baked in. And as a reminder, too, we've got a few questions coming in, which is great. Please continue to put your questions in and send them in that questions bar on the right-hand side. As a note, we actually are just launching viaExtract 2.3 today, which is going to be great. We're adding deleted data recovery. We're also adding, we talked about SU earlier, we're adding automated SU support, checking for that. So you don't even have to worry about this stuff anymore. If you're a viaExtract customer, viaExtract will actually do all of this for you as well. Ton of enhancements there, and I just want to put in a couple screenshots for you. We've got the new deleted data, which you can see there. It's going to automatically parse SMS, call logs for deleted data, as well as a few other key data points. And then we talk about rooting, we talk about the difficulties. In viaExtract, we do it for you, and we vetted the processes that we use for you before we put those in there, and we've automated them. So these are things that are temp roots that if you've seen my Twitter name, it's temp root. It kind of plays along with that. It's much more applicable in the forensic sense to use temp roots, and so that's what we put in viaExtract. And this is an easy few-click system where you just click forward, test for SU. Then if that doesn't work, it's actually going to use a root exploit, and it's going to give you the CVEs that those exploits tie to, so you know exactly what that's doing to your phone. So we like to keep these short, so you know, I'll open it up. I think Lene might have a few questions here, so let's go ahead and open it up to any questions that we've got from everybody attending.
Yeah, thank you. So I just wanted to remind everybody, you can ask these questions in the question bar or go ahead and tweet them to us at hashtag viaTalks, and our Twitter is viaForensics. So the first question we have from an attendee is, considering my background from repairing cell phones, I've rooted probably hundreds of phones. Since rooting always changes permissions, is forensic rooting possible at all?
Great question. So, you know, I don't know that it's necessarily changing permissions as it is changing your user access level. So it's changing what account you are. Now, when you do the actual root method, depending on what exploit you're using, that's going to have an effect on, you know, what that's actually doing to the device. So when you're doing a rooting in forensics, I guess the key and one of the difficult transitions from computer forensics to mobile forensics is in mobile forensics, changes are constantly happening, and usually you have to make changes. Usually you have to make changes to be able to get key, especially deleted data. So you're going to have to root. But the idea is doing it in such a way that is the most forensically sound possible method. So we only want to touch, when we're doing root methods, temporary locations, maybe caches, or if we have to talk to a lot of root methods use data local temp, which is kind of a temporary storage container in data. So we're going to talk to places that upon reboot have not affected any of the other data. And what you can do in forensic acquisitions is when you're talking about, hey, okay, so how do I prove that this data hasn't been changed? Well, there's something, if you're familiar with DD, which is one way of imaging a device, there's something out there called DC3DD. That's Delta Charlie 3 and then DD again. And what that does is that does a block-by-block hash. So instead of hashing the whole device as in a DD, you're actually going to hash every single block so that you hash the entire device, if you can, do the root method or make whatever modifications that you need to, and then do those hashes again, and you can show that, hey, here in the data partition, none of this data has changed.
So then can temporary root access be gained in some cases when permanent root access isn't available?
Yeah, absolutely. Most of the root methods, all of the root methods in viaTalks, and most of the root methods that I've ever used are actually temporary root methods. Besides rooting my own devices, and even when I root my own devices, I usually use temporary roots for the simple fact that on my personal device, I do a temporary root, and then I install something like SuperUser, which you might have seen in the slides where we talked about the SU support and viaTalks. I'll install that so I can control what programs have SuperUser access. If you just permanently root your device, while that can be very good, it can also lead to, if you've got something malicious going on your phone, they can take advantage of that as well. So, for me, I like to do temporary roots exclusively, and then put things in place that allow me to control what has access to that root. And if you're interested in that, by the way, quick plug, our CEO, Andrew Hogue, he is next week doing his a modified version of his talk from RFA this year, which is Learn to Love the Root, which is about rooting on basically using root in kind of BYOD environments to make your device more secure instead of making it less secure, which is what a lot of people think it actually does.
Okay, thank you. We have kind of a follow-up question I'm kind of interested in too. Can you please compare and contrast between the different types of root?
Yeah, so there are a few different. First, you have permanent roots, which a lot of times involves either some sort of exploit that makes a change that upon reboot is not going to go away. So you root your device and you go from that $sign to that £sign, and that is permanent. That is not changing until maybe you actively go out and do something to change that back, remove whatever files, whatever it may be. There's a root, one of my favorite roots called the 12M root. It worked on a number of Motorola devices about 1.5 years ago, and you would make some specific changes that if you made certain changes, it would give you access to. That would be a permanent root. But if you if you wrote specific, basically log files or whatever it may be, that would give you a permanent root. Whereas if you didn't, it would give you root for just that session. And then when you reboot, that root would go away. That is known as a permanent root. But upon if you have a root method that you reboot the device and it goes away, that is a temporary root. So that's why I compare and contrast. Permanent root is when you reboot and it's still there. Temporary root is when you reboot and it goes away. And ideally, for temporary root, you're going to write to temporary locations, permanent as well, but so that you're not changing anything or is very little on the device. So that's basically the difference between those two. SU, or SuperUser, is something where you have to root the device, then put SuperUser in the system location, which is protected. So usually you're going to have to remount your system partition on your Android device, make it writable, put that SuperUser binary into, I think it's system xbin is the location, then remount your system partition as read-only. And then whenever you connect to your device, so you ADB shell in, you're going to have the Android $, which means you're not going to have root. But then you call super user, it looks in that location, that system location for that super user, and if it's there, if it's appropriate, super user actually grants you a root shell. As mentioned, the super user checking for that access is now automated in viaExtract, as are the temp roots that we put in there as well.
So if I want to root a device through exploitation, does this mean I should focus on the applications that run with super user mode? And aren't they very limited? For example, the Delvec VM, etc.
So I'm gonna think through this one here. If I want to root a device through exploitation, focus on the applications that run with super user mode. Well, that's a question about what you're using for root, I think, more than anything. As we talk about root and forensics, what you're typically doing there is you're using that root access, that escalated privilege, to be able to actually get to the key data that you want to get to. So this means you're looking to get to application data, and as the base Android, stock Android user, you just can't touch that data, but you give yourself the privileges, the permission, as the root user to actually get at that data. If you're just looking to customize, then you can use super user mode or root access to add in, specific apps that really kind of enhance your mobile device. Maybe the security, maybe what your device does. Andrew's going to talk about how you can use root next week. How you can use root to really enhance and be a security positive for your mobile device. I use, personally for myself, Titanium Backup, which on my device, which allows me to back up key data, which allows me to, if my phone ever dies, I'm able to actually recover quite a bit of my stuff. And that's only available to me because I rooted my device. So that's more customization and making it more user-friendly, doing what you want to do. For forensics, you're typically rooting to get access to data.
So Kevin, we actually have a follow-up question from a user named Ibrahim. He says, if I use the JTAG chip-off method, to what extent can I repack the memory so when I'm done with the case, I return the phone? Logical acquisition, this won't get me access to all the applications, right? So then I can't do my data acquisition fully. What are your thoughts?
Cool. By the way, I just changed the slide. We're obviously still doing Q&A. I just want to put this up there for anybody that's interested in this information. So for the JTAG chip-off method, if you use JTAG or if you use chip-off, we actually teach, and we've got some JTAG training online that you can walk through that shows you how to do JTAG, acquire that data from the device, and you're just looking for a specific password.key, basically code, that allows you to, or those bytes that allow you to take that information and actually figure out the gesture.key, I'm sorry, not password.key, but gesture.key for that device. You can put the phone back together, figure out that gesture.key with some of the tools that we have in viaExtract, and actually unlock the phone, turn the phone back on, unlock the phone, and do a traditional acquisition. That said, for chip-off, I haven't done a ton of chip-off, but from what I understand, that's a little bit more destructive. Usually you're actually going to be pulling the chip off the device, and I don't think you're going to be able to put that back together, not in a traditional sense anyways. In regards to your logical acquisition, the logical acquisitions vary from what they acquire and how the actual acquisition is done. I can tell you in viaForensics, ours use what's called content providers, which is, so say you install an application on your phone and all of a sudden the application knows who your contacts are. And you're wondering, well, how does it know that? Well, that's because it's calling content providers, they're known as content providers, on your device, and it says that for the contacts content provider, because there's one of those, give me all the contacts on the phone. And your phone looks through and it says, yes, you have the right permission, here you go, here new app, here are all the contacts on the phone. So that's what ours does. So it traditionally doesn't happen with third-party applications. Some have exposed to content providers, a lot don't. So you typically don't get as much data from applications in a logical acquisition. That said, you can still get some very significant key data, SMS messages, a lot of photos, videos, contacts, call logs. All of that comes out of a logical acquisition that is very key data typically that you're looking for in a forensic acquisition.
Okay, thank you. And so then we have another question, which is, does viaExtract have rooting exploits for Android 4.4 and above?
Not currently, but I can say stay tuned. It is definitely something we're always looking to stay ahead of the curve as much as possible. So right now it's 4.3 and below, but you know, do stay tuned. We are working diligently to make sure you have access to root as many devices as possible. I've put the screen up for our next forensics-focused viaTalks. So we do viaTalks each week. They're same time, Tuesdays, 1 p.m. We tried to keep them under a half an hour, which is what we've done here. I'm very happy about that. Next week's, as mentioned, is our CEO, Andrew Hove, talking about rooting and BYOD. Our next forensic-focused viaTalks, we flip a little bit between forensics and security, is Katie Stremka. She's the author of iOS Forensic Analysis. She's going to talk about the benefits of jailbreaking iOS devices. So you'll see a little bit of difference between rooting and jailbreaking, and she's going to talk specifically about jailbreaking on iOS. You can register for her talk today at viaforensics.com/viatalks. As we saw for this one, we filled up pretty quickly, so please make sure that you register early and get in so you can grab your seat there. We will be putting out the video, some snippets, and also the full video of this viaTalk on our YouTube page. You can follow along on Twitter at the hashtag viaTalks as well to see all of the snippets and the videos that we've done in the past.
Okay, so is there such a thing as permanent rooting that can't be unrooted? For example, a device brought back from unrootedness.
I believe so. I haven't done it. I haven't looked too much into it because, as mentioned, we stay typically away from permanent roots as much as possible, or if we do, we're typically doing something that we can undo. So you write to, you know, a certain file that grants the Android shell user. It says, does Android shell user have root access? Yes or no, 1 or 0, basically. And so we'll do something like that. We'll get that root access, and then we'll change that file back. I haven't seen it, but if you're concerned, if you're in a Android forensic, you know, you're doing a law enforcement case and you have that question, I would stay away. As mentioned, wait, put that on hold, and wait until a temp root method comes out and sit on it. You know, if it's something that you're doing for fun and you've permanently rooted your device, the worst thing is you'll probably get a slap on the wrist from your carrier or manufacturer if you ever have to send it in. So that's about it. So thank you very much, everybody, for attending. We look forward to seeing you at Katie's talk and hope to see you next week at Andrew's talk as well. And every Tuesday here at 1 p.m. Thanks so much. Thanks to Linnea, and thanks so much from here at viaForensics. We appreciate it.
And don't forget that these videos will be up both in the full length and then individual question videos on our Twitter page. You can search with viaTalks, hashtag viaTalks, and they will be on our Twitter page, which is at viaForensics, as well as on our YouTube page. You can just search for viaForensics. And then for future talks and registration, you can go ahead and sign up at viaforensics.com/viaTalks. And thank you so much for tuning in. We really appreciate it, and hope you guys have a great day.